Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel and Escape from the City on the ABC. And Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of the 2018 Property Investment Advisory Firm of the Year.
All right, folks, here on the Property Couch, each week Bryce and I give you the insider guide to property finance and money management. G'day, Bryce. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. Episode 243. It's never sounded better.
What do you mean my voice has never sounded better, mate?
I said it's never sounded better.
Oh, okay.
I said episode 243.
Tell you what, Bryce, I'm really excited about this week's show. I'm just moving past the footy bit, right? Because none of us want to talk our footy teams at the moment, do we?
No.
But hey, we are. I'm just a little sneak peek. Got a bit going on here. We're going to take a glimpse at the future of how you'll buy property in today's episode.
We have got a very special guest. A tiny little bit of housekeeping, Ben, because Darrow got 9, aced it, and a margin of 2.
That is awesome. That is a round of applause.
Take a bow, Darrow.
2
and a couple of things, Ben.
Yes.
Our 250th episode is imminent.
Yep.
Imminent. So
how many? What are we today?
243, Ben.
So 7 weeks.
Yeah. So that's just probably more exciting for us than the listeners because it's just a nice little milestone for us. But we're going to turn it into something that's great for the listeners.
We'll try and get a megastar guest. Let's see how we go. We'll put our little thinking caps on. I know we're not giving them much time.
We've had you for 243. Is there any higher than that?
Well, you know, we've got a prime time TV star next to me, and
now we're sitting
Escape from the City.
Punch of glass now, aren't we? So, folks, the 250th, stay tuned. So, Stiggy's put the wood on you to make sure that the guest is worthy of the 250th.
We'll do it.
And we have got some, just for the listeners, we've just ticked over to August, Ben, and it's not or guest like it has been in the past, but very, very good guests lined up for this month.
Beautiful.
So it is epic, and it starts today. So before I get there, Ben,
yes,
I spoke to Kounnas. I love catching up with her once a month. She comes onto the couch. So if you didn't hear that, it's available. The audio is on the podcast. Ibis has put that up, and you can also go to Facebook, Ben. So I just want to say to folks, if you're on your mobile device now, and you like what we're doing, go and just like us on Facebook, Ben, because we are providing minimum 1 piece of new content on Facebook a week, but ramping it up to 2. Just new stuff, right? So what we're doing is the people who write in their questions, Ben, we find the questions, we get our big whiteboard out, and we explain it. So you'd be mad not to do it.
Hey, and Bryce, before we start with our very special guest today, just for those people who are going to hang around to the Did You Know? Hot off the press, CoreLogic numbers for the month of July. I'll finish the show with those, so hang around to the end.
Very good, Ben. But my Mindset Minute theme today is very much a lead into our very special guest, right?
Yes.
So it's a quote.
Yes.
It's a quote from the Dalai Lama, right?
Oh, okay.
Without technology, humanity has no future, but we have to be careful that we don't become so mechanised that we lose our human feelings.
Totally.
Right? So I was actually surprised to see that quote from the Dalai Lama because I probably thought that he wouldn't say technology is the future for humans, but I was surprised by that. But I thought that was a little lead in because our very special guest today might have a view on that. But before I do introduce them, I'll tell you who they are. We've got Trent Clews-de Castella and Steve Kounnas from Phoria. And the reason we got them in, Ben, was because we wanted to find out what the future of real estate is with augmented reality, with virtual reality, and more importantly, what this will mean for us as consumers. So just to give a bit of an idea, Phoria is a world-leading immersive tech studio that specialises in cutting-edge virtual, augmented and mixed reality technology. And Phoria are on a mission to transform human experiences and augment intelligent environments. Welcome to the couch, gents.
Thanks for having us.
What does that mean?
Where to begin, really?
What does that mean when you're on a mission to transform human experiences and augment intelligent environments?
Definitely. So really we're watching a really exciting space evolve, right? So we have a new medium of technology, and what we're seeing really quickly is these tools that are extending our senses, right? They're actually helping us see the world differently. They're helping us maybe perceive things that we can't even with the naked eye. And so when we think about it in that way, we're pretty excited in the fact that we can actually start almost like augmenting our own human abilities. And then when we apply that to physical environments, it starts to get pretty pretty wild and wonderful in some unique and interesting ways. And so what we've been doing the last 5 years is actually working with physical space, 3D scanning in particular, and changing the way that we can connect with these environments. So whether it's coming through remotely and seeing it from anywhere in the world from the comfort of your couch, or whether you're, say, walking into a display home and having a unique kind of guided experience through these spaces.
I want to talk about that a bit more, but I want to set this up today just to, I asked you guys, both of you, before we stepped in, I said, when were you born? You said you just snuck in the 80s, but the reason I asked that is because there was a program back in the 80s that went right through to the middle of the 90s called Beyond 2000. And I remember watching it. Ben, you'd remember Beyond 2000.
Yeah.
Hosts at the time were Amanda Keller and Simon Reeve, who are still household names.
Yes.
But what they were doing is they were trying to predict technical advances that we would see in a world beyond 2000. And I remember at the time thinking, no way, some of those things were off the charts, right? But they said we'd travel to Mars. We'd drive around in a George Jetson hovercraft, which wasn't quite right. But they also predicted that we would wear our computers. So clearly, we've got Apple Watches to confirm that. They weren't as sophisticated as that. I think it was a bum bag, Ben, that you were carrying around. We'd have in-car navigation systems, as well as MRI machines, which would replace painful bone marrow biopsy. So at the time, they were bold. People could not see that was going to happen, and yet we sort of take for granted the Apple Watch, the MRI, and the fact that Google now gives us in-car navigation very, very simply. So I guess that is really the backdrop for what we want to discuss today, because I think for the benefit of our listeners, Ben, we're probably going to hear some things that probably may sound a little bit, really? Are we going to do that? But as much as it was back in the 80s and the 90s with Beyond 2000, we're about to sort of get a little insight over the hill as to what that looks like today.
That's right, Bryce. I mean, I met the guys, I think about 2 years now, over 2 years ago.
2 years now.
So I went to a innovation conference and looking at new technologies, and at the end of that conference there was a pitch session. So those familiar with it, basically people get up and pitch their business ideas, and there was a few there. Even Jake and Kounnas was there pitching some particular idea. Anyway, I think it was Steve who pitched on that day, got up and basically talked about what we're going to do with VR, virtual reality, not necessarily augmented stuff, but that's where we're going to go to. And you were doing it in property, right? And so we're using a particular camera that was taking a 3D image of the property. And so I'm sitting there as a business owner with Bryce and thinking, okay, well, we buy all around the country. Our buyers are in different states. We already do some filming for our clients. So the connection there for us was, wouldn't it be amazing if we can have them sitting in our offices and they could walk through a virtual tour of the house, which is better than probably the hand cameras we were using at the time, and uploading all of the data and how long that take. Because it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that they're going to invest. So long and short of it, I gave you my card. We had a bit of a chat. We loved what you guys were doing, and so that partnership has formed. And ultimately, from there, we're now at a stage where you guys are 5 years into this program. What was the starting point of that for you? Like, what got you interested in this field? And where do you think that interest is going to go? Because I'm with you in terms of, once you started showing me that I could look through walls and I could see pipes in walls and I could see inside mechanical engines and I can see all the different parts by just hovering my phone or a set of goggles over it, the mind does start to wonder, isn't it? I mean, you become Superman with X-ray vision.
I'll take from where it started and you can maybe go from where it's going, but where the crux of it actually began from, so we're both from Canberra and we always wanted to move to Melbourne, and we had this problem when we were looking to rent a place down here, that we were coming down every second weekend or every weekend to see a house, and it kind of started this thing like there's got to be a better way, and most problems are started from your own self, right? And me and Trent have been throwing business ideas around since we were 12 years old, and Trent was playing with a lot of technology at the time, and he found this camera. And at the time, it was nowhere near as good as it is today. But we still saw an opportunity very early on that we thought we'd jump on.
And just definitely on top of that, so when we started back in 2014, we found the way we were consuming content online was changing, right? So traditionally, everyone was using the desktop to browse the web. And at that point in time, we actually saw a shift in terms of the majority of just like internet activity was coming from our smartphones, right? And so we realized at that point in time, there was like almost like a new touch point that we could actually reach people, you know, anywhere on the go, they could actually jump into this type of media. And then the standards in online browsing were changing. So traditionally supporting 2D content, but now you can actually interact with 3D content through a web browser rather than just having to download an application. And so we've just felt like the floodgates opened up. And at that point in time, the hardware was advancing and it was helping us produce 3D content, and we could then distribute it online. So it was just really being in the right place, recognizing that it was a genuine problem that, you know, some of these new tools could actually help us solve.
Now, you talked about the Canberra trips back and forth, so that obviously planted the seed. You guys were kicking around, you saw this camera. How did it come from an idea that you guys were just, you know, mates since you were 12, thinking one day we'll be in business, to this has actually got some legs. I think we should pursue this, and we actually should put all of our energy into it.
So we were really fortunate. My uncle owns a real estate agency here in Melbourne, so we went to them and asked if we could do some trials with this technology before we kind of fully committed to what we're actually about to do. The first house we scanned was out in the eastern suburbs. We created the virtual tour, and at that point it was very rudimental. We put online, and that house wasn't able to sell for the last, I think it was 3 or 4 months, so that's why they gave us an opportunity to try something different. Online, within 4 days it had over 14 or 15 inquiries, and then it ended up selling to a Chinese investor, sight unseen.
Wow.
And the best part about that, the next day the neighbour saw what happened with that property and listed that house with the same agent. And it was that kind of turning point for us. We're like, okay, there's something actually here. We might not have it completely, but for that sort of effect, I think we can look into this a bit further.
So take us back to that. So you had a listing that worked thanks to an uncle who gave you an in at work, next door listed. Because clearly you guys are 5 years down the track and you were kicking some serious goals, right? But back then, talk us through the mindset. What were you thinking? What was the next step? How did you put the next foot in front of the other?
That's interesting, right? Like it's when you start a business and you start from nothing, you kind of reach out to your friends and family to get behind you. Fortunately, my grandma gave us a loan, and we bought this camera that actually hadn't been released into market yet, so we were on this early adopter program.
So I'm assuming not in Australia, so the camera's from the States.
It's from the States,
It's
Did you go and chaperone at home, or did you just wait for it to be posted over?
Did you nurse it back to Australia? Don't touch.
Literally flew over and picked it up. You couldn't actually get it shipped internationally. They weren't even looking into expanding beyond the US at that point in time. So that was a company called Matterport. Started a service-based business, kind of started convincing some of our closest friends to get behind and kind of have a little bit of a career shift and try things, outside the box. And as Steve mentioned, the very first scam was a little bit daunting when we realized the results weren't really as good as we had envisioned. But what's been phenomenal is actually watching the accelerated rate of improvements that are happening in this space, right? So within a few short months, it just went leaps and bounds. And then we had a few barriers that we recognized in the early days, right? So, as good as this content is, if it's not on the portals where everyone's starting the search process, then you're not really reaching the people where they're at. And so we had a really good engagement with both realestate.com.au and Domain, and we actually started giving them some code so they could actually change the way that they actually surface this content. And what you'll find today is amazing, right? So it's actually the second thing that you'll see when you're going into a property. You'll see the hero image and you jump into the virtual tour. And so making that accessible has actually really extended the engagement time online. So they're actually finding it's almost about 4 times more engaging than video. So it's pretty exciting.
Because it's interesting, like timing is important, right? Because if you think about, so YouTube obviously is known globally now. It's the #1 video platform, but it wasn't the first. The first one was the News Corp one, which was the social platform. I'm trying to think of what it was called.
The social media? MySpace.
And they were trying video, but obviously the feeds and all that were too slow, so it didn't get traction. So enter 12, 18 months later, where they had a better rendering and a better ability to basically take it through the pipe with a little bit better quality. That was enough to move the dial. So coming back to what you're saying here, and so now video comes through phone, but back then, video, dial up, internet mode, well, here we are, and you're waiting for it to download. So it's that advancement in technology that's moving the dial in regards to the visual presentation of information, as well as voice and those types of things. I mean, Am I right in saying that Matterport has some ownership by News Corp? Is that correct?
Yeah, so News Corp invested into one of their later rounds to help, I guess, extend their presence here in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, so it's pretty logical, isn't it? When you sort of see these big global companies that are investing in this type of technology, they see a space for it. I mean, we know that Google, Apple, so their VR stuff is, I mean, because VR hit us probably maybe 3 years ago, where it had this little bit of a rush, and then you could get you could set your phones inside the goggles, and that's how it was going to work. But I think we're closer to that tipping point now, where this is going to be adopted technology more permanently. Do you want to explain that to us?
Yeah, definitely. Even in the last 3 years, 20 million VR headsets have sold, right?
20
Which
million.
is pretty phenomenal. When we started, we were often even, laughed out of the room when we would pull out this, fandangled headset. But then what we found along the way is the price was coming down exponentially. The ease of use was changing, so it was much more intuitive. You didn't need a computer and multiple sensors, right? Yeah. And so what we found now, if you look at Gartner's hype cycle of emerging technologies and trends, VR is actually off the hype cycle. It's now in the mainstream. Yeah. It's actually at a price point that's actually driving, democratization of it. I was just reading yesterday, Zuckerberg with their latest headset from Oculus, they can't make them fast enough. They're actually selling faster than they can actually manufacture them. So we're finding, I think right now, it's just like hit the sweet spot. It's probably what, maybe 20 years ago, 2 decades later, we're in a position where it's actually, right place, right time, right price point, and the content is incredibly powerful.
So you went out there and you started, so you bought this camera.
Yes.
Bought your first camera.
And you nurse at home, you get off the plane, what happens next?
Yeah.
A lot of late nights, to be honest, because we both had jobs at this time as well. So we would come together after work and kind of figure out how we could kind of put this together. And it kind of goes back to your point before in terms of potentially being a little bit too early for where we saw it. We saw it perfect for the real estate industry, but a lot of education, a lot of awareness would have to go before that. So we started thinking a little bit more holistically, where else could it be used in terms of home builders or tourism and a whole bunch of different assets. And we just started testing everything and anything. And it was one of those things where we'll just go in and give free tours to everyone just to see what would take, and then kind of figured out from there where the sticking points were and moved on.
Which was the one that you gave free tours? Where were you seeing the trends? Which ones were grabbing and which ones were bombing?
I'd say model homes was a quick one to pick up on. It makes a lot of sense for them, right? Yeah. They've got displays all around the country, all around the state, and it could take 45 minutes to 3 hours to get from one design to another. So if they can have all of their assets digitized online, then they've got an archive of everything that they've got, and they're stable. So they're going to be there for quite a while, and they're going to be using those designs for a while. So it's an investment that they're happy to make. Tourism's another really good one with hotels. People want to see where they're staying, Airbnb style things as well. And then real estate coming off the back of that has always been that slow burner moving and creeping along very heavily. So both sales and property management, where we're seeing it uptake quite a lot right now.
And it sort of makes sense in the property management side as well. So coming back to our theme of investment and property, having a digital record of the condition of your property before your tenants move in. Because there is natural wear and tear, and some of the legislation is going to be changing here in Victoria, which will allow pets to go into properties, right? And so then it's about, how appropriate is a Dalmane, or a large dog inside one of those properties where there's natural floorboards, and the argument on whether that's wear and tear or whether the dog's claws have ripped the crap out of the floorboards, and now I want a $6,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 claim to repair those floorboards. Well, you're going to have a digital record of that. So I think for property managers, in being able to add value to their landlords, that's going to be a big part of that story, I suspect.
Yeah, and we're already seeing it today. There's a number of different cases that have gone through the property councils in Victoria and Queensland that have actually proven this fact with the digital presence of the Matterport 3D tour. So it's actually already happening right now, and it was a really good mind shift of where we were targeting for sales, so helping someone actually list the property, where obviously in property management the marketing spend's not quite there, but then when you can flip it on its head and use it for that bond discrepancy tool, it presents a whole bunch of other values behind it, and we're seeing some great traction because of it.
Take us to Matterport Camera 101, just for the benefit of our listeners who aren't in your world. What happens? So how does the 3D tour happen? What would be the difference between, geez, I want one, to here it is, you've got one.
Yeah, I think Matterport, for anyone who's listening at home not aware, basically it's a startup that's come out of Silicon Valley, and it's received a healthy amount of funding. I think about maybe 60 million so far. But basically the way the camera works, it's relatively simple, right? So it looks like a shoebox. It's kind of, relatively easy to port around. It sits on a tripod. It's got a little motor inside, and you connect it with an iPad. You hit a button, it wirelessly then spins around 360, and what it's actually doing is collecting photographic information, the same thing that we'd see in Google Street View. 360 panoramas are pretty common these days, but at the same time it's actually shooting at infrared. So infrared is like a pattern of light that can measure depth, and so that's what makes Matterport quite unique, right? So it's not just looking at photo bubbles, but it's actually creating this kind of 3D contour of the space around you. And so when you go through a virtual tour, you'll actually see, a dollhouse view, or give you this bird's eye perspective. You'll have almost like a macro understanding of the layout of a home, and that changes the way we can actually interact with the content. And then what we've been doing the last few years is actually diving in deeper to that data, right? So we were just speaking a second ago around like a bond discrepancy tool, right? So we're actually using this, it's known as digital twin. It's almost like a archive of a point in time, like a ledger in a way, like a smart kind of contract effectively. And so what we can actually do there is we can use all the spatial information to create floor plans. We can actually use 3D content to fly through and have these unique videos, kind of like Google Earth in a way. So the way that we're actually using the data is actually opening up, and it actually makes it more accessible and more affordable for, say, people looking to then market their home, where they can actually create a whole suite of content from just one asset, rather than feeling like they need all these other suppliers coming in to create it. And it's just the beginning. We see it changing in the future, where 3D content effectively will be able to be produced from our smartphones. So you might see, even on Facebook these days, they have 3D photos, these kind of interesting lenses, and it's just taken from a camera on our smartphone, right? And so in the future, you'll be able to walk around and scan your home and create, a real-time blueprint in 3D. That's really exciting, because that's when the whole data generation opens up exponentially.
So, I mean, for a rookie person searching for their first property, Bryce, one of the rookie mistakes that they make is they look at the photos and they don't get a sense of depth of the bedroom. That's the classic one, isn't it? Like, you've got a really small second bedroom or third bedroom. We get to see it because we look at hundreds and hundreds of properties each week. But the rookie looks at that and says, oh, there's another bedroom. And then when they go and do the physical inspection, they get there and they're really disappointed that the property is so much smaller than they thought it would be, because the camera angle was taken and there was more depth in that. What you're talking about with with the laser, that sort of that laser imaging, you can also get obviously the measurements inside that photography or that digital footprint, and so you can do floor plans, you can do all these other things from it. And so for me as a consumer, that's perfect, right? Because sometimes I get floor plans, but it doesn't show me the measurements. And if I'm looking at the photos and I'm a rookie, so I'm going to spend my Saturday, which is probably what you were doing in Canberra, coming down in like, we wanted to rent a property and it's like, this is nothing like the photos presented it, right? So what a waste of time. Got on the, had to drive down. We would have been able to only have a look at half a dozen properties instead of the 12 that we looked at if we knew what we were doing. And so again, there's that friction point that you're taking away.
That's good for consumers. Ben raises a good point, right? Because that's great for the person who's looking at the property and they're seeing it. But your core customer would be the real estate agent, right? Trying to take this up. So they may not want you to sort of highlight that bedroom is smaller. So in the field, on the ground, have you had any sort of objections that are around that from the agents?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we're quite cognizant about, but we use a lot of data to kind of prove our points, because using this sort of technology, we can collect a lot of data. And both here in Australia and overseas, Trent mentioned it before, we're getting 4 times the engagement online, but we're also getting the same amount of foot traffic through on open days. So we've compared this in comparable properties. So people are staying in the 3D tour as long as they're actually going to the house. So yes, a few people might not be going to there, to the actual open property, but those people weren't interested in the first place. So you're actually getting interested buyers to walk through that house. And so when you know that they're walking through, those real estate agents can now work harder to get those people, because they've already built up a rapport with that property.
It's a good point that you make, right? Because it's a natural filtering tool, because essentially a real estate agent puts photos up on portals. Their job is to not inform you to the maximum amount. Their job is to get you to make an inspection.
Agent 3.0 is about building trust these days, because a lot of the knowledge that they had is now available for the consumer, right? Oh, what sold recently and all that. Most consumers can get access to that, can't they, Bryce? So the point for me is, if I'm Agent 3.0, which is more based on trust and building relationships, if there's a crack in the wall, don't auto cut it out and not show it, because I want to know that, right? Because if you're sending me to something that you're saying is a palace, and I get there and it's an old, shack, you've lost me. You don't have trust with me.
And also, I'd argue as well, consumers now are more savvy, right? We put those photos up, people know that photographers are using wide-angled lenses and they're getting the best shots. Yeah. We've been doing this for a lot of time, so the consumers are much more switched on to what's actually going on in the market. So being able to be more trustworthy, as you mentioned, is going to build that rapport a lot easier. And then when it comes to that negotiating for sales price, feel like you're already on their side rather than trying to deceive them beforehand.
It's true. We give a smartphone video to our clients to show them through, and it's raw and it's real and it's really effective because of the authenticity and the transparency. Okay, so you pick the camera up, you've tested it. So what happens next? Take us on the next part of the journey.
Yeah, definitely. So in the early days, as you would when you're starting, do anything you can to grow the business. Yeah. And we had one camera, it was being used, pretty decently. We were getting some strong traction from different areas, such as model homes, for instance. But then, we basically landed some big contracts, and we needed to basically 4x our capacity within a month. And we were already at capacity. So it was a bit of a daunting moment for us. And so, it was easy to get some more hardware. So we got, 5 more units shipped across. But then at the same...
shipping then, were they? Yeah.
We
got courier.
We had a system.
Once you prove yourself, they let you take a couple more.
Yeah. It's definitely...
Payment up front though.
It's good. It's been good. But then along the way, we realised there was a lot of redundancies in the way that we're running the service side of the business. We were trying to use a lot of these online solutions for distributing and managing content, right? But we quickly realised that they were all designed around 3D media, and we're working with a whole new form of media, right? 3D content. And so we started internally, just to help us run more efficiently, building our own tools. This was actually automating some of the post-production on our end. It was helping us manage bookings and a fleet of technicians, if you would. And so at that time, we actually started realizing, wait, these tools are actually pretty kick-ass, right? They're actually going to help us do our job more efficiently. And we realized, in contrast with that, the friction and the challenges that we were being faced with the service-based business. So it was, a no-brainer at that point that we needed to change gears, switching from service to SaaS. Yeah. And then at that point in time, we actually had a conversation with Matterport in the US, and we're like, we've helped grow the market here in Australia. Let us actually be the distributors. And so they were actually, it was right place, right time. They were looking at opening it up. They gave us the keys, and probably two and a bit years on now, we've really been growing the market here in Australia and New Zealand. I can't even imagine how many cameras we would have sold now, but it's been phenomenal, right? Exponential in terms of how we've been able to democratise 3D media within the Australian real estate market.
You just referred to SaaS, so software as a service. So how does that? What does that look like for you in terms of a business model? How did you pivot and use those cameras so that it wasn't a service-based business?
Yep. So we were mentioning before, you can create a whole wealth of data out of this camera. So whether it be the floor plans, the schematic floor plans, the 3D tour itself, high-res photography, or even videos. To begin with, we're doing that all manually. So that takes time and human resources. We've got some very smart engineers behind what we're doing, and they're able to actually create that within 12 hours. So what previously used to take a couple of weeks, we can now get back to the real estate agent overnight. So if you're scanning property that afternoon, you'll get a 3D tour, floor plan photos, one-page website, all branded, all completed, and delivered back. Pretty much automated. Wow. Within 12 hours, and that also reduces the price quite heavily. So you're only looking at a few dollars at this point in time.
Yeah, the rationale behind it was we recognised, there was two paths when we started in the early days. 3D content was quite edgy and new, so it was kind of contained to the top end of the market, top 10% of listings, multi-million-dollar properties. But we wanted to go for scale and volume, and so we realised that we could bring efficiencies to how people were generating the content. And so we've continuously driven down the price now, where you can create a whole marketing suite, some $3,000+ of content, faster and cheaper than it costs to produce a black and white floor plan. And that's because we're not relying on this manual process of going around and marking with a laser, but we're actually generating it more intelligently with a better tool set and a better software package to back it up.
But doesn't that reduction in price mean that you're going to have other people trying to jump into the space?
Yeah, it's a really good question, which is something we would openly embrace, right? If more people are stepping in, realise it's a sign of the times, right? The market's definitely maturing, and as a distributor, we actually want people to come in because then we can actually license them the software and help them grow the business with hopefully some of the fewer pain points than the ones we had to go through in the early days.
It's abundant thinking. It's growing a marketplace as opposed to trying to dominate a marketplace. It's best to have a marketplace in the first instance than not having something at all. I want to bring it back to the customer benefit. I mean, we're a consumer show. We're not an entrepreneurial show. What are some of the things that you can see into the future in regards to this technology? So we obviously saw the very famous augmented stuff that came through, the Pikachu thing, and so that was a worldwide phenomenon. Everyone's running around getting hit by cars, chasing these virtual things. Take us through where you think, from firstly real estate point of view, but then probably broaden our minds in terms of coming back to what you were saying before, Trent, about if I've got a digital image of my home, what does that mean for me in terms of furniture and a few other things?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been amazing watching the whole world wake up to these tools, right? So I think VR's come a long way from the Viewmaster, right? Where we can kind of see things with some 3D and it feels real, to now we have these headsets that can transport you anywhere in an instant. So the first thing we've noticed is VR mature in terms of price point and the capabilities of hardware. It's definitely been accelerated by companies like Facebook and Oculus just really investing heavily in it. There's some new tools coming out which are pretty exciting. So we'll start with augmented reality, right? So that's been around for some time. It's been a little bit, emerging, finding its place in the world.
Can you do a quick 101 on what augmented reality is?
Yeah, definitely. So VR is a starting point. Virtual reality, you put on a headset and it can take you anywhere. So VR is effectively, transport yourself somewhere else. Augmented reality is you can use your smartphone to then see anything. And so, for instance, you might want to look at what the new IKEA couch looks like in your home. You can then use their application and drop it there and have it spatially accurate within, that environment. And then the third is actually mixed reality. So this is, Horizon 3.0, right, where we're actually looking at smart glasses. And that means you can actually see through these lenses and see digital content within your real world. So it's quite similar to AR, but it's more hands-free, it's more immersive because you're not looking through a window now, it's within your surrounding environment.
We've had Nigel Dalton on the show and we did a bit of a fun time with him, and we were looking at the glasses, so it's Google glasses and a few other things. Because you've got a lot more real estate, don't you, when you sort of think about what you can put in your broader site scope. Yeah, absolutely.
And what we've noticed is, whilst people are often getting confused, VR and AR and MR, what are these new tools? We call it XR. It's actually is a new term which means extended reality, which is actually the spectrum of these new technologies. So all they're simply doing is trying to extend our perception of reality in some form, and this ties back to our vision as Phoria. We want to extend human perception and experience, right? And so what we're finding now, AR was very much popularized through Pokemon Go as an example, but technically it wasn't really AR. It just got people talking about it and thinking potentially they could make money from it, which is definitely a good thing because that's where investments come in. But now, just recently, you might see, if you're walking around the city, for instance, if you're using Google Maps, they've actually implemented Geo-AR into their Google Maps application. And so what will happen now is you'll be navigating through and you'll pull up your phone and it's going to render the path in front of you through the camera. And so you can think on one hand it's more intuitive rather than where's this little top-down arrow pointing and it's bouncing around, but now it's actually recognizing features and helping kind of anchor and locate you a little bit more naturally. And if you think about that from a business context, if you're looking up and walking around the streets, there can be pop-up information around restaurants, maybe there's special offers, so whole new landscape to commercialize a business through applications such as Google Maps.
You're walking straight into a retail dress shop, and as you're walking in, there's a sort of blank space, but you look there and that's the most popular dress at the moment, or the dress on sale. You don't even need to look through the racks or anything. It's just there. right? So you can see how that can be immersive in terms
Definitely.
of, and very powerful for the consumer behaviour.
And that's it, like retail and AR is a really natural fit. There's some great companies here in Australia. One's called Plato, they're doing some really good stuff with retail visualization of products.
Yep.
But I think what was unique and what we see coming, right, is something known as digital twin. And so really that's 3D data of physical location. So a digital twin is you're effectively creating like a digital replica of the real world. And so Google Maps have done that really well to help us navigate the streets. But what you're just speaking about is how we might navigate the interior world. We've been scanning the interior world for 5 years now. We've got some 8,000 spaces on our platform that have been virtualized. And so using that data now, you can not only maybe perceive it as it was at one point in time, but you can start applying new layers of content and information over the top, right? So we're doing some work just across the road with Melbourne University and the engineering firm, and we're using digital asset layers to go, oh, what's through the roof now, what electrical wiring is running through the ceiling, or you can think about all the infrastructure projects happening in Victoria at the moment. Dial before you dig in AR is a no-brainer. I want to see where the plumbing goes before I start digging a trench. So I think that kind of extended perception
Home
is
handyman
really
who gets, in the construction of their home, gets that digital layered footprint each time. So the camera comes in at frame stage, then it comes in at wiring stage, then it comes in at plumbing stage. And so all of a sudden I could just unlayer it. So that home handyman's not putting a hole in the plasterboard to put something up or cut a hole, that he's not cutting straight into electrical wire or something along those lines. I see it having, where's the, imagine in high-rise buildings, right? Water. We've talked about that before recently in terms of it finds its own level. Where the hell is it coming from? Well, there's no pipe here, but that's where it's dripping. Okay, well, we need to know where the nearest pipe is or where that water is
Flying into.
flying into. So I do see it, in terms of this new age is real, and it's got to be. It's really helpful, right? Because we're taking out the friction points in terms of all of these challenges we have.
And that's what we're in right now. It's a paradigm shift from that's a cool shiny novelty to this is practical utility that I can use on a daily basis. And so we're really excited as well. I think it's pretty clear, how incredibly impactful and transformative our smartphones have been, right? And that will continue to change. Just recently, Apple have invested. They've actually filed some patents in mixed reality and smart glasses. So you can imagine maybe the iPhone of the future is going to be some specs that we'll wear and will actually help us live and kind of operate and work more efficiently.
With voice command as opposed to eye command. That I see that being a real possibility.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So we're just hanging on and just enjoying the ride and trying to lead the charge here in Australia.
So transport us 10 years from now. So how's someone going to buy a piece of real estate in your minds?
Yeah, cool. We've seen some interesting trends in off the plan, right?
Yep.
So that's already happening today, where how do you perceive something that doesn't exist? So visualizing, digital designs almost at a level of quality that you can't even tell if it's virtual. It actually looks like it's the real thing.
Yeah.
So we're seeing some really good traction there. What do you think, Steve?
So Trent was just talking about how Google's mapped the outside and we're currently mapping the inside. In 10 years from now, I see it being a full suburb profile. So you're going to be able to define which suburb you want to buy in by looking at the schools, the streets, all in 3D, whether it's on your desktop, your phone, your mixed reality headset or in VR, and then narrow that down with all the properties. Right now, probably 3 or 5% of properties have virtual tours. When that gets up to about 80%, then you're going to have a holistic overview of being able to look at all the properties that you want. And our ideal outcome, the problem that we're still trying to solve is that, all right, I don't have to go to 20 properties this weekend. I've narrowed it down to my 2 or 3 that I really want to get to and spend a lot of time there looking at. And that's the way we kind of see it working a little bit more. And also just building that community a bit more around that 3D side.
It's a time saver, isn't it? It's a huge time saver.
You talked 3 to 5 and up to 80%. What's the run rate? What's the timeline to get up to 80% based on the current run rate?
It's growing about 3 times year on year. So we'd definitely love to think within 3 to 5 years we should be in a pretty healthy position. But who knows? These things are moving exponentially.
Yeah.
But right now, the price point is in a really sweet spot. And it's actually not just an innovative decision. It's actually more an economical decision now for businesses. Yeah, so bring it on.
Well, because even as the consumer, as an owner of several properties, I I would want a digital footprint of that asset that I own. I don't care about the portals. I don't care about the estate agent. If, you know, there might be value in me just basically for insurance purposes and those types of things. You know, we're seeing at the moment, if we've got that external and internal footprint, climate change and stronger weather events. So if floodings come through, if I've had a tree land on the corner of the building, I can, you know, that digital footprint can be overlaid with a new footprint of the image of the tree that's taken the corner of the house off, and all of a sudden the quoting can be more precise from the builder around, you know, what's the repair cost going to be as opposed to a rough estimate and those types of things. So
that's a really good point. Even what Steve was mentioning a moment ago around a neighbourhood profile, right? So City of Melbourne right now are doing some amazing things. You know, they're investing really heavily in 5G and looking at how that's going to progress and roll out. But then you can imagine when you've produced a digital twin of a city, you can start simulating some of these events before they happen, so we can operate, you know, more intelligently as a city to be proactive to actually prevent things like flooding or fires or congestion, right? So if we can think about that as a way to kind of plan for the future rather than responding to the present, I think hopefully it'll put us in a better position.
Is there a darker side of the advancement, right? So Albert Einstein, I fear the day that technology will surpass our human interaction. The world will have a generation of idiots, right? So I don't think it's as, I'd be interested in your feedback, but I guess in the wrong hands, some of these, like in terms of real estate, I think it's all positive, right? That people can get better information, and I probably have to think a bit further if I think there's any dark side to that. But just virtual reality and augmented reality in general, perhaps at a broader level. Do you guys have? And it's probably like asking a barber if you need a haircut, right? You guys are in the space thinking, no, there's no downside. But is that something that crosses your mind?
I think definitely, right? So it goes back to your original quote. Human connection is the most important thing, and if we lose that through technology, then loneliness will seep in, and we know that loneliness has got a whole bunch of different factors around it. I think it comes back to the same mobile phone argument. So before the mobile phone, people were supposedly interacting more, going out and playing more. Now everyone's sitting on their feed and just liking things. And then also had a dark side, right? So you've got virtual bullying now that comes through on these smartphones. We don't know what these results may be in virtual reality, but it'd be foolish to think that there wouldn't be anything there.
Because, you know, we saw, what was a couple of years ago, 60 Minutes had that story about these virtual worlds that people were going into, and they can be the rock star in that virtual world, whereas in their traditional life, you know, they're probably leading a boring and mundane life. So I come back into that point around, we've been really strong on this. Culture, human interaction, arts, all the things that make us amazing as humans, we cannot let go of, because there will be opportunities like, you know, the movie Total Recall, where you can go into a virtual world and be a virtual whatever. There will be a lot of that. There will be the game side where people will want to be stars. And in some cases, we know, you know, people don't want to leave their room because their screens and how they interact is obviously their life. So you need to get that balance right. So I think there is going to be some learning from a humankind in terms of how we're going to manage.
For me, I'm equal parts excited and equal parts not so excited, right? I've done an escape from the city myself. We've moved, and part of it was to create an environment where my kids could be in the ocean more and be in the outside more. So, but I love, like, if you guys could accept the challenge of maybe a virtual reality scenario where Collingwood is no longer in the AFL.
She's not to accept it.
I could watch that game quite comfortably with
Freo wins the premiership every year.
No, they win every second year, but in fact I'll take it every fifth year if Collingwood aren't in the competition, right? So
I'll bring it back to property. There's one other thing that I think is massive in terms of renovations and also choosing designs. So coming back to what we were talking about before, about you'll be able to see what that fridge looks like in the corner. But when you're spending $350,000 on a renovation or $500,000 on a new build, what you have to do is you have to go to their, you know, if you go to a large builder or whatever, and they give you this sort of, you know, here's some designs of colour palettes and templates and style guides and all that. And you're sort of looking at like 4 tiles together, and you're like, and you've got to choose, that's 5 sets of 4 different tiles together, and you think, what is that going to look like on that wall? With this sort of stuff, their presentation is going to be so much more dynamic, because here, put the goggles on, here's the room, that's the whole bathroom, swipe for the tiles to come through. Which one do you like the best? Right?
That's
Just
easy for
better
people to
decisions.
picture right now because that's happening, isn't it?
Yeah,
You go
exactly.
into a kitchen showroom and they'll do the renderings on the iPad. You know, it's not hard to see that being a part of the
The
way that
sample
people make
pots from
decisions.
Bunnings anymore and putting
Yeah.
that on
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
that can sort of go pretty quickly, right?
Well, with the sample pots, one of the painting companies actually brought out their own AR app where you can put your phone up to the wall and then paint it different colours, and you can actually see it and it puts it all over there. So
There you
it's
go.
getting that information already through. Yeah.
So it's already happening, which is amazing.
Cool.
So guys, I know we're talking about, well, Bryce was sort of saying about Beyond 2000 and how we were going to wear these things as a sort of, and there'll be like a cable going up to a set of goggles or whatever. It's obviously come a long way, and you have bought some stuff in for us. And so go to the show notes for everyone who's listening and click on the links because you will see us having a look. We're going to do little bonus videos in terms of what some of this tech looks like, and you're going to take us through it. So check that out in the show notes because there is some pretty funky gear that you've been able to bring in for us to have a look at.
But folks, we appreciate that you have given up your time and your busy schedules building augmented reality, virtual reality. What was on a mix? XR, experience reality.
Extended reality.
Extended reality. Sorry, I've got to get it right. But you guys are clearly at the forefront. You can tell by every time we catch up with you that you guys are really passionate about what you're doing. So well done. Good luck. I look forward to seeing in the future how our team of buyers agents will be interacting with
how the property market's going to be looking as buyers in the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to radically change how real estate agents are going to deal with you. I mean, we've got a glimpse of the future today, and we really appreciate that, guys. And we'll check in with you in maybe 6 to 12 months' time and see how it's all going.
Maybe we could do the next podcast in virtual reality.
Oh wow!
17 competition. It was a pleasure. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Ben, before we sign off officially, I'm just going to give you my life hack.
Sure.
This may seem a little bit pedestrian in our present company, Ben. So in the theme of today, I was trying to come up with a technology life hack.
Okay, right.
So I'm a bit
Boys are probably giggling in the
I'm
background.
nervous in the shadows of these two titans. But my life hack today is, sorry, Ives, it's about an iPhone. But
Of course it is.
Well, I only use an iPhone. I don't use anything else. Did
Maybe
you know,
should
Ben?
research. We should give him a challenge for 5 Android hacks. Right, 5 Android hacks before the end of the year, Bryce.
Will you help me, Ives? Why would you say no? Why are we friends?
All right, what's your life hack,
Are we
mate?
friends? Hey, Ben, so on the Photos app,
Yes.
you can go in here and you can go search down
Yeah.
the bottom. So you get your photos, you go search down the bottom right. And look, you can see what you're doing 1 year ago. You can see what you're doing in winter. You can see what you're doing at the sporting events, trips. Oh, there's one of you, Stevie, that's popped up there. Where you were at the restaurants. So
So if you've got a million photos, a good way of filtering. Is that what you're telling me?
and look, I can even go to wonderful Joel's wedding. So
Now, is it smart enough that...
I don't know how it
Is
works out that it's a wedding.
But has it got facial recognition or some type of
Yep.
image recognition?
People,
'Cause-
so
'cause-
it goes through the people.
Whatever. So if you put dog in the search and see, have you got a picture of a dog? You reckon?
Oh, unplanned. Yep. There's
Oh, it searches all the dogs. That's cool. There you go.
That's
So it's
amazing.
using image recognition software behind it. So there we go. The world is getting very, very clever. So no.
Do you want to know what popped up, Iris? When I put in dog, have a look at this. It popped up a video of Ben when he got really shitty that Collingwood lost the grand final last year.
No, that was me going to the loo
Yeah,
in
but that's-
between a break.
That's because they just kicked the goal, but sealed it. Oh, I did not plan that, but that just worked out so beautifully. So there you go. In the company of these two gentlemen who
Yes.
are technology,
Steve and Trent,
make me look a
superstars.
bit sort of pedestrian. There's my life hack today, folks. So go and use your photo app on the iPhone. Iris, can you
Yeah.
let me know if it happens on the iDroid?
Android.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
iDroid. I said iDroid.
You're even trying to get it rebranded.
Ben, did you know?
A couple of things. Did you know, Bryce? CPA data was out yesterday. Quarterly headline inflation up 0.6 of 1% for the June quarter. Really on the back of a couple of things. Firstly, petrol was up 10.2%. So that's not the seasonally adjusted, that's a headline number. The weaker dollar also means that our cost of imports are up, and also our international holidays was also up highly. So annualised rate of inflation 1.6. Most people forecast it will be about 1.5, so a little bit above. The other big news that came out globally, and I'll do more of this in my interest rate announcement that I do every Tuesday.
Which we'll put
on
the podcast.
On the podcast as well. US Fed Reserve cut their cash rate by 0.25 last night to bring that down to 2%. Really, you can wash it all through and say it's just basically the trade issues, right? Trade issues then basically has a global effect, a sentiment effect, and that's impacting global and also the US. So it's a bit of a hedge of a bet. He said nothing to see here, no panic. They don't want to cause any panic, but effectively bringing it down because of that trade. Now, the stuff that I wanted to get to, the big numbers, right? Have we bottomed out, Bryce?
Wow.
Have we bottomed out? Our great friends at CoreLogic, Tim Lawless and the team there, Cameron Kusher, here the data's out. So nationally, basically stable prices for July. So I'll quickly just run through them.
Do you need your glasses? They're over there on the bench.
I need my glasses.
Yeah, I saw that frantic look for them, Lucky.
Well, the fact that you've got no light on it for me is...
the irony is you needed your glasses to look for your glasses, so it wasn't lost on us. That's all right.
Here we go. So Sydney for the month,
Yeah.
up.
I just put a big spotlight on for you.
0.2 of 1% growth in the Sydney market. We have bottomed. We found the bottom in Sydney. Melbourne, so for the quarter for Sydney, thank you, Ivers, for taking a vote, still -2 for the quarter, and annualised still -9. In terms of Melbourne, Bryce, Melbourne growth 0.2 of 1% for the month, 0.1% growth for the quarter. Loving it. Annualised -8.2. Brisbane 0.2% growth for the month, still -0.8 for the quarter, -2.4 for the year. Adelaide, this is an interesting one, right? Yeah. Adelaide down 0.3 of 1% for the month, down 0.6 for the quarter, and down 0.08 for the annualised year. But I had a little bit of look about one of the best performing areas was actually Adelaide North. Was actually one of the best performing areas. So it means
that's encouraging.
Pockets within pockets, right, Bryce?
Well,
remember.
Ben, that's encouraging because we have been buying a lot, not in Adelaide's south.
Yes, we've been
not in Adelaide's east.
In Adelaide.
We've been buying it in Adelaide's north.
Maybe we've moved the price in Adelaide. In terms of Perth, down -0.5 for the month, down 2.2 for the quarter, down annualised 8.9%. Come on, Perth, get off that bottom. Hobart up 0.3 for the month, quarterly up 0.1, annualised 2.8% growth. Darwin up 0.4, -2.1 for the quarter, annualised -8.7. Canberra -0.3 for the month, -1.5 for the quarter, annualised still up 1.1. So best performing capital cities for the month, for the 3 months to July, Melbourne and Hobart. Hobart up 0.1 of 1%. Weakest performer.
Don't say Perth. Come on.
Bryce.
Come on.
Perth down
Maybe they need a change
-2.2.
of coach over there.
Highest rental yields are in Darwin at 5.9%. Lowest rental yield, Sydney at 3.4%. Okay, so you can get this information from our good friends at CoreLogic. Hopefully we can put some information in the show notes because there's a lot more data in there, but I'm conscious of time. I promised you those numbers, and there we are, hot off the press, first day of the month of August. So we got those numbers thanks to our great friends at CoreLogic.
Well done, Ben. I did not know that. Thank you for filling us in. Thanks again, gents, for coming in. It was a pleasure. And Ben, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Say it well every week, mate. See you next week, folks. Hey there, folks. Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarises the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.